Welcome back, y'all. It's Ms. KeKe. Thank you so much for being here. Listen, you guys, thank you so much for the love on the intro to the series, my series of Reclaiming My Identity in Christ. I enjoyed chatting it up with you guys in the comments. Today, we're talking about part 2 of that series, and it's going to be a little bit more of a backstory / story time. God told me that this episode is going to be, how did I get here? And I was like, I wasn't ready to jump into that yet. But listen, the thing I learned and what you'll know by the end of this is I'm only going to do what God tells me to do with this channel. So let's talk about how we got here. So I have, for the better part of the last, say, 12, probably 14-ish months, had a lot, and probably going back even 18 to 20 months, but really the last 12 to 14 months, a lot of life changes, big life altering changes that have happened in my life. And I had a lot of struggles with mental health through a lot of those changes. A lot of things were challenging, and not gonna lie, even though I was working on my mental health, I realized now that a lot of what I was dealing with, I was not really working through. I was more so covering up. And that's a dangerous thing to do, y'all. I'll go into, how my mental health got to the place where it was in another video, because that's a whole nother story on its own. But at any rate, I have been really struggling with my mental health, and it had gotten so bad that one day I went to work and I could not get out of my car. I had a panic attack in my car. I probably sat in my car a good close to maybe 2 hours before I just was like, I cannot do it anymore. And that's how bad I had been struggling. Like I got to a point where I just physically could not do it anymore. And so I ended up taking some time off work to work on my mental health. And that ended up being one of the best decisions I have ever made in my life, but also one of the worst decisions that I've ever made in my life. And I'm going to go into why. Why was this one of the best decisions I've ever made? Because in that time that I took off work, I got to reconnect with my husband and my son in a way that I hadn't been able to before. I got to take my son to school every day, pick him up from school every day. I had never been able to do this. I've worked 10-hour days, 10.5-hour day, as long as I can remember. I've always had to be at work before he got to school, and I've always gotten off after he got out. So it was always my husband taking him, dropping him off, or me taking him to some kind of before care, after care type situation. I got to spend time taking my son to school and praying with him and reading with him, and we got to not have busy. We weren't busy all the time. I got to just enjoy time with him. Same thing with my husband. I got to date my husband. We got to actually go places and do lunch dates and things like that we hadn't been able to do before, because I had this time now that I hadn't had, and it felt like such a blessing. And the biggest thing that came out of that time off is I got to reconnect with God in a way that I had not been able to before. Again, I had time. I wasn't just running all the time. And so I because I was taking this time off to work on my mental health, one of the things that God had told me to do was create spaces that bring me joy. And so I had decided that our back deck was going to be my space. And so we had it redone, and we were working on getting it redone anyway, but it just worked out to where when I got it redone, I was able to make that my little outdoor space. I had my couch set up. I would light my candles out there, and I would just read the word. I would study. I would create. And I was going through therapy, and my therapist was like, hey, find something to throw your time into. And so I was creating more, and I was reading the word and studying and really connecting with God. And all was going really, really well. And all of these things started happening. Every time I would start to feel better with my mental health, I got hit with something else. In the time that I was off, I lost my father. I lost my niece. And I'm going to say this one time, and then I'm going to say it differently every time going forward. I lost my job. I'm saying it that way so that you guys will understand that the job was taken from me. But what I do want to say is God told me, don't refer to that as you losing your job. Refer to that as your job losing you, because you were the catch in that situation. So my job lost me, y'all. And it was a difficult time. All of it was a difficult time. But God reminded me that you wouldn't have been able to experience any of this in a way that you have been able to had you been working. I wouldn't have had the time to spend with my dad before I lost him had I not been off work. I've been running from work every day to try to get to him to see him. And I didn't have to do that. I got to just be with him in those days. Excuse me. I got to, when I lost my niece, I got to go be with my sister right away. I didn't have to wait and think about it. I was able to get in my car and go. And it was just all these things that God was like, this would have worked out wildly different if you weren't off. And so that's why I say that was one of the best decisions I've ever made. But I also said it was one of the worst decisions that I ever made. Why? That was one of the worst decisions I've ever made because that is not what God told me to do. God did not tell me to take a leave of absence from work. God told me I was done with that job. He told me to walk away from that job. And I didn't do it. In my own carnal thinking and lack of trust and comfortability, I stayed and I suffered. I stayed and I suffered because I did not listen to God. I was supposed to walk away. And had I done that, then this job couldn't have been taken away from me, right? Because you can't take something I done already gave up. But God, because He is God, gave me so much grace, even in not, because He didn't, He told me to leave. He didn't tell me to take a break or take a leave of absence. He told me to be done. And because He's God and because of how good He is, He extended me grace and He allowed me to be blessed, even in a season of me being hard-headed and not doing what He told me to do. And so I thank God for that. I thank God for the time that He allowed me to have off. I thank God for the time that I got to spend with my son and my husband. I thank God that I was able to spend those days with my father. And I thank God that He showed me grace, even though I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And so that's why that was the worst decision, because no matter how good it worked out, it still wasn't obedient. You have to be obedient. We have to learn how to be obedient, even when it doesn't feel right, when it feels weird, when we don't understand. God knows and sees everything that's coming ahead. All we see is what's right in front of us. And we making decisions based on what we see right in front of us. And God, we got access to God, and He can see everything that's coming. And instead of listening to the one that can see and knows everything that is coming, we in here and in here with what we can see and what we think and how we feel about it. And it's not smart. And I learned it the hard way. And so that's my question for you today, because you guys were so absolutely amazing in the comments the last time. I want to pose that question to you. Have you ever done something differently than what God told you to do? And did it cost you anything? What did it cost you when you did not obey what God told you to do? And on the flip side, have you ever done something that God told you to do and it didn't make any sense to you at all, but you did it because you knew it was God telling you to do it? And did you have a testimony from it? I would love to hear either sides of those. And so that's the kind of how do we get here part of that, because that job that I had was a part of my identity. I had this corporate identity. And again, later on, I'll get into some of the specifics of what happened. But a lot of what I had gained in that employment was being stripped away little by little. And then once the entire job was gone, that whole side of my identity was gone, and it was bigger to me than just, the job losing me, because it was not just the job. I knew in my heart that it was the career. I knew that God was telling me You was only supposed to be in this for a season. You've been doing this way longer than I instructed you to. This season's over. I'm telling you, this season's over, and I just wasn't listening. I wasn't trying to hear it. So yeah, the stripping away of the job to me was in line with the stripping away of the career and the new identity that was to come, because I was no longer going to be defined by that role. And I had no idea how much of my identity was tied to what I was doing with my career, y'all. When it was gone, I was like, well, who am I now? And it never crossed my mind throughout that time off. But when it was completely gone, who am I now? Who am I? I got to figure out who I am in Christ. I got to. Because that part of me that I thought was going to be me till the end is now no longer. So yeah, if anything that I said today resonated with you, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to leave that comment down below. I want to know your testimonies. I want to know your stories. And until the next video, keep going and keep growing. I love you, and God does too. See you later.